It's the Sittin Sportside podcast, exclusively on 1045theteam.com.
It is the 1045 The Team Sittin Sportside podcast on 1045theteam.com. You can find us on this 1045 The Team app. If you just open the app, well, first got to download it on your app store or Android application store, and download it, and then go and search us Sittin Sportside podcast, and all our podcasts will be right there for you. All right, let's get the music started because we're going at another baseball preview. We are halfway there, moving to the second half, and this one's all about the American League Central. So this is what happened. We did 3 divisions. 2 of them, we did the American League East already. That's probably the best division out of those 3 that we did. Both Wests are done. This is what happened. We saved the worst division and the 2 best divisions for the last 3. Well, this one is the worst division by far. It's not a hot take. It's not it's not a novel idea. It's what is just kind of accepted. It's what it is. And I gotta say, this one should be shorter than most. I'll try to keep this, and I tell you this, you probably get annoyed at this point, but this one should not be that long. Let's start off with the first place team. It's going to be the Cleveland Indians again for me. I think this will be a little bit more competitive than last season. When you look at overall where you stood, if you were the Indians last year, you were kind of complacent throughout most of the year, and you know what? They still were a favorite pick to win the World Series last year by a lot of pundits when the playoffs started, even though that overall with the standings and where they ended up last year was not even close to what the other top 3 teams did. They finished 9 games less than the Red Sox. And to put it in perspective, than the Yankees, and a good 17 less than the Red Sox. And then even the Astros, they were down. So they were 91 wins and 9 less than the 3rd best team in the American League. That's the best way I guess I can put it. Put it in perspective, they were also 6 games worse than the Oakland Athletics who were the second wildcard team. And then on top of that, even more perspective here, finished just 1 game up on the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, the Rays couldn't have made the playoffs over them, obviously. They're in a different division. Cleveland won the division by 13 games over the Minnesota Twins. We'll get to the record to the rest when I get to those teams. But because I'm going to let you know, this is probably the most important division where this is the case, if the teams will improve on their win total. And it's going to be tough because probably a lot of them will be similar. But what I'm saying is this was not a great team last year, but they were still enough talent. They have a lot of good pitching. And I think for the same reason why a lot of people were looked at this team and said this is a team that's going to compete in the playoffs, even though they were by far the worst team of the 5 to make it into the playoffs in terms of record, was because of the pitching. And you got to start here. When you talk about the Indians, you got to start about their pitching staff. Money-wise, this team probably isn't going to be able to hold on that much longer with these guys. With Trevor Bauer, Corey Kluber, they're going to be close to coming up, and who knows what's going to end up with those guys. But as of right now, none of them have been traded, even though their names were thrown around in the offseason. And if you're going into the season with Corey Kluber, Trevor Bauer, Carlos Carrasco, Mike Clevenger, and Shane Bieber as your starting 5, that probably is the best rotation in baseball. I talked about on the American League East Ball podcast. This is the last American League podcast that we're doing, actually. So I've been through them all. And I mentioned that the Red Sox have a really good rotation. And they do. But I think this has to be easily the best rotation. 4 of these guys, Kluber, Bauer, Carrasco, and Clevenger, had 200 strikeouts or more last season, and I think that's the first rotation ever to have 4 or more 200 strikeout guys, and I don't expect that to change. They also have Danny Salazar recovering from an injury. He's probably going to come out of the bullpen if everything stays the same here, but they have a really good rotation, and Kluber is in it year in and year out in the Cy Young Award race. Trevor Bauer should be in it again this year. Carrasco's, to move Carrasco down to 3 now is crazy. And that's why this is the best rotation in all of baseball. Moving on to the bullpen, you have Brad Hand, you have Adam Simber. Those are like your 2 best. Dan Otero is okay. That's the problem. I think the rotation, the rotation's great, but the bullpen now with Brad Hand, you lose Miller and you lose Cody Allen, who's okay last year, but you still lose some bigger name guys in the bullpen, there's still some struggling thoughts about this bullpen. I think that's why the team won't be as dominant as it is. We get to the roster, the fielding batters in just a second. But a big reason why this team is not going to be looked at as going to be able to keep up with the Yankees, Red Sox, Astros of this league, it's because the bullpen is also not that good. It's similar to the Red Sox, but I actually think the Red Sox might have some better arms than this bullpen. That's saying something. Obviously, Brad Hand is a really good closer, but he's cemented now into the ninth inning role. That's great. It's all well and good, but if you don't have a bridge to him that's good enough, obviously it won't matter as much because you have really good players, starters that can get you deep into ball games. So that's why they'll win a lot of games. But because of the times where they're not going to go as deep as they should have, like if Carrasco implodes or if Bieber doesn't have it that day or whatever happens, I'm not sure the bullpen will be able to keep you in it enough to make a comeback. And let's get to the offense. I'm not sure the offense is good enough to make a comeback. So that's why when you look overall at this roster right now, there's enough holes in it to you say they're still not elite. This is not the 2016 team that had sky's the limit potential for dynasty. And that's why this division, as crazy as it seems, and I'll get you the team that's the two teams that obviously have the chance to do it, and I think only one makes sense for most people, but I'll give you my second. We'll have a chance to dethrone them this year. I think there's a legitimate chance because the bullpen's not great, and the offense could use some better. The reason is better talent in certain areas. The reason why, though, this is still a team that should be picked number one, and I'm definitely picking them at number one, is because they still have two of the best hitters in all of baseball. Jose Ramirez at third base and Francisco Lindor at shortstop. Lindor will be out probably a good couple weeks into the season. The earliest return day is being said to be April 4th. But, and look, the intern people for them right now, with Jason Kipnis also being out, Brad Miller, Eric Stamets, and Max Moroff. It's not good fill-in by any means for Kipnis and Lindor. But you still have Jose Ramirez, MVP candidate last year, probably the only better player in the American League last year. If we're talking about a body of work, was probably Mookie Betts. I think the body of work, because he played a little bit more than Trout, he might have been the second best player in the American League last year in terms of what they actually did on the field and not about what could have been, if Trout played a little bit longer. So yeah, he's a really good player, Jose Ramirez. For Lindor, like he's good. He's not. It's not as concerning because he'll be in a couple weeks into the season. That's one of the best players. He's going to get a monster deal at some point, and there's concern that he won't be in Cleveland. So that's why there's not as much concern with Francisco Lindor because he's going to be back. The concern really goes more with, and Brad Miller's not a terrible fill-in, in all things considered, for Jason Kipnis. There's concern there, obviously, with Kipnis, but the concern goes more to the outfield. They traded for Jake Bauers, which was actually a good get from the Tampa Bay Rays. He's expected to play left field. They got Carlos Santana back after a year in Philadelphia for him in a trade as well. He's a good first base / designated hitter, and Hanley Ramirez is actually a decent guy for a designated hitter. So like they went out and got some guys who could possibly fill in. Leonis Martinez, the center fielder, will be a good fill-in gap if Greg Allen doesn't take it. I mean, Martinez is actually pretty good. Bradley Zimmer's coming back from right shoulder surgery in July, so we'll see if he can make an impact this season. Tyler Naquin in right field. So you have options. I think Allen's a popular option that a lot of people are looking at. Whether he gets everyday time in right field, I think Naquin's going to get some opportunities. Who had a decent rookie season a couple years ago. So there's names, but they're not big names. They're not going to hit a lot of home runs, and that's why Hanley Ramirez is a big get. Signing Carlos Gonzalez, the former Rockies outfielder, to a minor league deal puts some perspective into what could be for this team. But overall, the outfield is still weak. Like Jake Bauers is a great option out there. Hanley's good to have now at the DH, but you still have very not offensive-centric center fielders and right fielders, guys who aren't going to give you these great numbers that you've gotten from Michael Brantley in the past, even in the couple years ago when you had Jay Bruce late in the year. So they might be able to trade for somebody, but the problem is that we hear that they're trying to sell Kluber. We hear they're trying to sell Bauer. So there's some concern around this team in multiple areas. Bullpen, outfield, but they still have two really good hitters in Lindor and a great rotation, and that's why there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to be still a force to be reckoned with this year and a competitor in the Central. And, of course, I think they're going to win the Central yet again this season. The team that I think has a chance to really push against them, first and foremost, is the Minnesota Twins. First, the stupid reason, right? You got to start with the stupid reason. stupid reason why I think the Twins will probably compete in this division for it is in 2015 they were a surprise team that almost made the playoffs. 16, worst team I think in the American League. Last 2017, lost to the Yankees in the wild card game, so they were a good team yet again, and they made it to the wild card game. Sure, they lost it, but they were good enough to make the wild card. Last year, weren't the worst team in the league, but still finished, while finishing second, they still finished 6 games under 500. This is the next year. I think they're going to be a better team. Now, will they win the division? Will they make the playoffs? I don't know. I think they'll finish over 500. And a big reason why that is they shored up some positions. Let's start off with the acquisitions that they got to play second base, Jonathan Scope. They bring in Marwin Gonzalez, who can play all over the place, will probably be locked down at everyday position at third base. CJ Cron coming in to play first base. He has an opportunity to maybe quote-unquote break out this year, something that he hasn't been able to do in times with the Rays and the Angels. And then moving past that, your outfield is really good with Eddie Rosario. Byron Buxton, I think, will break out this season to the potential that he had shown in the past with power and speed, and he's a really good fielder in center field. We know that, so that'll help out the pitching rotation. And Max Kepler also is a breakout candidate in right field to have a great year there, too. And not to mention another acquisition, Nelson Cruz at the designated hitter position. And I want to talk about one other acquisition that they had in Ronald Torreyes, a really good team player that if he's not on the roster, that's understandable, probably be in the minor leagues, but such a great player for the Yankees, a fan favorite, and rightfully so. So I'll miss him as a Yankee fan, and I was hoping that he would go to the Orioles, the team that actually needed a starting shortstop. I think he would have been worth giving an everyday opportunity to, but instead he will probably be a heck of a utility player there if they give him that opportunity. It does look like he'll be in the minor leagues. Third baseman Miguel Sano is expected to be on the injured list till May, so that means that he will be out for a little bit. He actually got that injury celebrating a Dominican League title, I believe, in the Winter Ball. So maybe that was Venezuelan, but it's still not good. Still not a good look. He's a guy that needs to be really good for them, and if he comes back, he'd be an extra addition to what already is a good lineup. You can move Marwin Gonzalez all over the place. You can move him to shortstop if you needed to, where Jorge Polanco will lock down a starting position. So I think there's good news in that. So I think the offense could actually be really, really good for this team. No doubt about that in my mind. And that's why the acquisitions, Jonathan Scope, I love that one, of course, too. And Marwin Gonzalez is very underrated. I think he's a Ben Zobrist, the current Ben Zobrist right now, and I think the bat proves that, too. So not much else to talk about in the offense. I think it's actually good enough to compete in this division for sure, and that's probably the big reason why I think their offense from top to bottom, even going to the catcher position with Jason Castro and maybe even Williams Astudillo, who's shown some pop, whether he's played here or whether it was in the Venezuelan League. He's shown he can play well. So I think that offense shows that they're really well-rounded. They don't have two players like Lindor or Ramirez that are going to be that per se. Maybe someone goes into it. That's hard. That's lofty expectations. But they're a really good lineup, I think, top to bottom. And then you go to the rotation. You have Jose Barrios, who's really, really good. I think he's an ace, and I think he could be one of the top 5 pitchers in the All-American League this season. You had Kyle Gibson, who had a really good year last year, breakout year, if you will. Jake Odorizzi, who wasn't great, but was a good acquisition for them last year. Why can't it be a better year for him this year? I think it can be. Michael Pineda coming back from his injury, I believe it was Tommy John, when he was with the Yankees. So he looked good down the stretch in rehab last year. Never got in a Major League Baseball game for the Twins yet, but now that he's got the opportunity, I think he should be good for them. And that's a pretty good top 4. You enter Martin Perez, Cole Stewart, Steven Gonsalves, Zach Little. Those are all possible starters for them. Perez is the veteran. Gonsalves is the guy I like, and Gonsalves and Stewart are the guys I like to possibly lock those down. So if you can hook one of those guys on for a 5 spot, it's pretty good. And it's important to note, though, they'll go with that 4-man rotation for the first 3 weeks of the season because of the distribution of days off early on. So they won't need Martin Perez or Stewart or Gonsalves, and they can see what they have in Stewart and Gonsalves in the minor leagues, while Perez is more of a long reliever early on. So there's good things there. And then you go to the bullpen with Trevor May, most likely getting, we don't know that for a fact, but Trevor May and Taylor Rogers are good at the end of that bullpen, whether one's closing and one's not. They're still really good pitchers that I think that are really, I don't want to say underrated, but players that are really good that no one really knows about, and they're a good part of that bullpen. You add Blake Harker, Trevor Hildenberger, Addison Reed, those are good pitchers that can get the job done. I do think their bullpen is better than the Indians' bullpen, and I think that will pay dividends for them in some capacity this year. I do think they'll finish about 7 games over 500. I think they're a team that's going to compete with the Indians for the American League Central title, but it will be a tough year for them. Or it'll be a tough battle for them, I should say, because the Indians will be really, really good. It may, honestly, come down between these two teams and the 17, 18, 19 odd games that they'll play this season, who can win the most out of those, because I think that they'll be pretty even in the rest of the distribution in those as well. So I think this is actually, while it's not a great division, and someone has to make the playoffs after that's the thing. Someone has to make the playoffs out of this division, and I think it will actually be a fun race to run, a race to look at. To watch down the stretch between these two teams, even if it's not a great division. And, maybe they don't have the best chance to beat Astros in Red Sox or Yankees in the playoffs. The third team, I did say that there was one other team that I liked to maybe have an opportunity to win this division. I'm going to say this team finishes still 2 or 3 games under 500. But the Chicago White Sox, I think, are a team that maybe they haven't gotten as far as they should have, based on other, how the Cubs did it, how the Astros did it, even how the Twins kind of were in 2015, how the Yankees were able to do it, how the Braves were able to do it last year, of teams that were, quote-unquote, ahead of schedule. And while the White Sox's true rebuild was not supposed to be ready probably until 2020, you've had setbacks, Michael Kopech being out of all this season. Dane Dunning, another great young pitcher, is going to be set for Tommy John surgery. So there's just a lot going wrong with this system that people didn't develop enough. Maybe they didn't push people enough. But I still think this is a team that could be, quote-unquote, ahead of schedule. You have Jose Abreu, I think, who's on the last year of his deal, either one of his last years of his deals, that, you want to use him as much as you can. So I think this is a team that's going to have a good year. And like I said, I have them finishing under 500 still. But who knows what the impact of Eloy Jimenez is going to be. Who knows if Luis Alexander Basabe, another guy that got in the Chris Sale deal, will make an impact this year for the light-hitting Adam Engel. But I do think that once Jimenez comes up and he plays whatever position they're going to have him play, most likely left or right field. I think it's probably right field. You have John Jay and Daniel Palka, I think, who are an interesting platoon option in left. Engel's great defensively in center field, so that could be a big part and a big boon for your pitching staff. And so if your batters get a little bit better, if Jimenez can come in and make Moncada better, make Tim Anderson better, make Jose Abreu, Yonder Alonso, the designated hitter, is actually an underrated option. So their offense isn't nothing that's too flashy. But Wellington Castillo as a catcher and James McCann, I think that's one of the better platoons in all of baseball for the catcher position. And Yolmer Sanchez at second base, I think, is a good player as well. So I think this is just a really good overall team that no one's really looking at. The fact that Eloy Jimenez will probably be up because they signed him to that record-breaking deal before anyone signed. It was the third, I think, contract before anyone's played a major league game, but they got a contract and he got the most money out of any of them. I believe the longest as well. Maybe not the longest, but definitely the most money. And if he comes out and makes an immediate impact, this team just gets that much better. He's a Ronald Acuna type player that's going to be really take you by the horns and elevate you to a different level. And I think that's why this offense will get from Jimenez. Rotation-wise, there is some struggles with it. I think Carlos Rodon hasn't really... He had a magical run at 8 or 9 games last year that was kind of overlooked a little bit. He hasn't been able to recapture that in spring training, and there's some very much so, there's some concern behind it. Reynaldo Lopez hasn't been fantastic out of the rotation. I think that even if you look at their overall prospects with even Dylan Cease, in addition to Kopech and Dunning, I think that you might not even want him in the rotation moving forward. But he's the better option between him and Giolito. Lucas Giolito has been really bad in the major leagues last year and then spring training this year. Ivan Nova, a solid get to veteran presence in this rotation. Irvin Santana, I think, is also a good signing by them to possibly make an impact when they need him to at some point this year as a starter. So I think the rotation is underrated, but you're going to need people to step up. You're going to need Rodon and Lopez to step up and Giolito to be a lot better, and this is going to be a playoff team. So while I like their options, I like their the stuff that these guys have, and if they can put it to good use and really hone it in, I think that they can be a good rotation. problem is, can that happen? And the bullpen's actually pretty good. I think Colomé, not the best closer, but is solid at the back end. And leading up to him being Kelvin Herrera and Nate Jones, I think it's a great bridge. And on Jones in the 7th, Herrera in the 8th, or however they're going to do it, I think it's a really good bridge. Manny Banuelos, I think is a good long relief pitcher, lefty pitcher out of the bullpen if they need him. Maybe long, maybe he's going to be a good short option from a converted starter. Jace Fry has actually had some good opportunities, so the bullpen is actually okay for me. And Dylan Covey in the bullpen role after having a decent run in the rotation last year. Maybe he'll get a start or two this year, but if you put him in that Colin McHugh role like Colin McHugh was in last season for the Houston Astros, I actually like that for him, and I think that this team could really benefit from it. So I have a lot of high hopes for the Chicago White Sox team that no one's talking about. Don't think they'll win the division. Don't think they'll make the playoffs. Don't think they'll be over 500 per se, but I would not be surprised if this is a team that's still pushing and we're talking around the All-Star break and wait, how is this team here? And who knows what's going to happen past that. Let's go to the 4th place team. I'm going to go with, and actually, look, so what does that mean? Do I think the Twins will improve on their 78 wins? Yes. Do I think the White Sox will improve on their 62 wins? Obviously. Talk about the Kansas City Royals. Will they improve on their 58 wins? I do think they're going to improve on their 58 wins from last season. They were finished last place in the Central, and overall they finished as the 2nd worst team behind the Orioles, or excuse me, in front of the Orioles last season. This year, I think that they're going to be a little bit better. When you lose Salvador Perez for the entire season, losing a veteran presence, it hurts you. But they signed Martin Maldonado to a very team-friendly deal, so I think that part benefits them very much. So Ryan O'Hearn is really good first baseman. I think in giving an everyday role will be really good. He was great down the stretch last year. Whit Merrifield is an underrated second baseman. Alberto Mondesi was incredible down the stretch last season. If he can steal a lot of bases for them this year, that's big. You add Hunter Dozier at third base, but you also add in Chris Owings to be a nice versatile guy who can play second, short, and third for an option. Gordon is not great in left. Soler has yet to break out. I think he's good in right. Billy Hamilton in center field, good defensively, and pressure's off of him now on a team that's going to steal a lot of bases. I think this is going to be a team that's going to love to run a lot. You can probably mark it down that Billy Hamilton and Alberto Mondesi are teammates that probably have the most combined stolen bases if they stay healthy for the entire season. I actually really like Brett Phillips as a backup, and maybe in the minor leagues, but a backup outfielder who'll get an opportunity at some point. I didn't even mention the fact that Terrence Gore is back on the Royals, and who knows if he's going to get playing time, but that's another stolen base threat. So this is going to be a team that's going to run a lot. I love it. Lucas Duda as a designated hitter, I think is pretty solid too. So they're a better team. The rotation could be better. Jorge Lopez actually is a guy that doesn't strike out a lot, but I'm really interested to see how he moves forward on this team and how he could possibly be better. You have a veteran in Homer Bailey and Danny Duffy. Bailey and not much hope for it. Duffy, while he's battled injuries and I expect him to battle injuries again this year, he's just been a disappointment as a consistency. He's never gotten to where the Royals fans would want him to get. Maybe this will be the difference. Brad Keller and Jacob Junis at the top of the rotation, they're both okay. And that's where this team lies. Not a great rotation. I can't hang my hat on the rotation. And even though the bullpen's gotten better, even though Boxberger might be out for a little bit, Willie Peralta, Ian Kennedy moving to the bullpen role, Jake Diekman, and Kyle Zimmer, who might get an opportunity to come up and pitch against his brother if Bradley Zimmer comes back in the Indians. Should be pretty cool. So there's some storylines to follow. I think that they'll be better for sure than their last season team, but not a team that's going to compete for the playoffs. Should be fun to watch some of these guys. Like I said, Ryan O'Hearn could be fun to watch. And I think that the speedsters, Alberto Mondesi and Billy Hamilton, and of course Whit Merrifield, who also knows how to steal some bases, are also pretty fun to watch. So this is going to be a team that's going to steal a lot of bases. Whit Merrifield stole 45 bases last season. This team's going to have the most. I don't know if it's a hot take. Don't think it is based on these numbers. The Royals are going to have the most stolen bases this year. They're going to run all over you. Beware, teams playing the Royals. They're going to run all over you. I'm actually nervous with the Yankees series against them because if Sanchez is catching, could be a tough series. See, they're going to run all over them. I moved to the Detroit Tigers. They ended up last season with 64 wins. Like I said, this is tough to do. I've gone increased on every single team, except for the Indians. I kind of feel like they're going to stay the same. Maybe even worse. Maybe in the high 80s instead of the low 90s. I'll say less. I have to go less for one team. And even though saying less than 64, it's got to be pretty bad. If I'm saying the White Sox are going to be close to 500, if I'm saying the Royals are going to be more than 58 wins and maybe closer to 70, someone has to give. Something has to give. And I'll say it's the Detroit Tigers, 64 games, maybe only 62 wins, maybe over 61 wins. I don't know. Maybe I'm being the math maybe doesn't add up. But there's still some good things to like. I think First thing that you have to like is Victor Martinez retired. Not that Victor Martinez retired per se, but now Miguel Cabrera doesn't have to play the field and he'll be the designated hitter. Maybe? Or maybe they'll play him at first base. I don't know. I don't know exactly what they're going to do, but that's an option. If that's the case, that's big. If not, they'll probably play John Hicks at DH or at first base over Cabrera. I don't know. Maybe I'm hoping that's the case because I have Miguel Cabrera in fantasy this season, so that could be it. But catcher-wise, they're okay. They lost James McCann, so that's a downgrade. Nico Goodrum has actually been really good, so the offense could be better. Josh Harrison, I think it's an okay signing. I know people think he was worth more money, maybe worth a bigger deal. There's the bargaining agreement with these things, but overall, I just don't think he's that great of a player. Could be good, though, with him and Jordy Mercer, but maybe better defensively than they're going to be offensively. John Candelario, I think he was very much of a disappointment. While he's got some power, I think he needs to hit more for average, and I would expect better from him. And I don't think he's going to be that much better. Christian. It's spelled like Kristen. Not that Kristen Stewart. But his left field, okay. Mikey Motok in center field, not the best offense. Castellanos, I love Nick Castellanos. He's a really good offensive player. But I don't think he's going to be able to hold this team down. It's Jacoby Jones, if he makes an opportunity. I think Daz Cameron maybe will be an opportunity in center field at some point this season. But there's three players I love on this team offensively. Miguel Cabrera, Nick Castellanos. I think Nico Goodrum could be pretty good. I'm hoping for better things from Candelario, but he's let me down in the past. But not a great offensive team. And while Cabrera, I think, will still hit very well, and while Castellanos will still hit very well, just not sure the rest of the offense will be able to score enough runs for this team. And then you put in the rotation. Matt Moore was not good enough to be a starter last year on a team that needed starters. Texas Rangers. He's in this rotation. Tyson Ross was better last year, but moving to the American League, don't love it. Jordan Zimmerman was better last year. Still not great. Matthew Boyd might be the best pitcher, and he's probably at best a top 30 pitcher. And then Spencer Turnbull and Daniel Norris rounding it out. Norris has yet to get the potential that he needs to get. Casey Mize, the pick from last year, maybe makes an opportunity this year late in September, but it's not all the life. Michael Fulmer out for the year. Tommy John surgery probably. It's a rough team. And even if their offense even if Harrison's really good and their offense can be actually a decent offense, the pitching's not going to be good enough. It's just not a good rotation. And then even the bullpen, you have Joe Jimenez and Shane Green. Green being the closer, Jimenez being the probable closer. Call me and tweet at me at EricH1045 in September. Jimenez will be the closer, but they don't okay bullpen. It's not great. In fact, I'd say it's probably the worst in the division. Maybe. I'll say it. Burrows might be worse. So there's that. Not a good rotation. Maybe the worst bullpen in the division. And the offense is okay. Got some big guns, don't get me wrong. But it's just okay. Welcome to your 2019 Detroit Tigers. And I actually feel more confident after going over that team that they will be less than 64 wins. I like I said, I'd like to give you some, hopefully I wasn't too pessimistic. I like to give you some positive things about your team if you're a Tigers fan listening. And I did. Castellanos, Cabrera, Nico Goodrum, maybe Casey Mize, maybe Daz Cameron this year. That's your best bet, is probably trade someone for more young talent and see some young talent this year. So I hope the Tigers fans are able to get that. I'm Eric Handeman. Thank you for listening to this edition of the Sittin Sportside podcast. You can get the rest of the previews that will all be up before the season starts officially. The everybody starts this Thursday on 1045theteam.com. Click on the podcast tab and click the Sittin Sportside podcast. You can go to youtube.com/team1045 and click on the Sittin Sportside podcast playlist to access them as well. And any other questions you have, fantasy-wise, baseball-wise, you can tweet at me at EricH1045. And I'll be back at the right before probably a Thursday morning podcast where I'll give you all of my playoff predictions as well as awards predictions before the season starts. That being said, I'll be with you guys throughout the season on the Sittin Sportside podcast, but also on Sittin Sportside Sundays. That will be every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. till noon, or on days of Yankee baseball that start at 1 o'clock until the pregame show where we will join John and Susan. Thank you for listening to this edition of Sittin Sportside podcast. Make sure you listen to other Sittin Sportside podcasts because we have a good time. Mike James has been out for a little bit, but we still have a fun time. Can't wait to get him back on the podcast in a month or two. and others, including Bryce Zielinski, Taylor Lattimore. Hopefully we get them on the program as well. But for this edition of the Sittin Sportside podcast, once again, I'm Eric Hanneman, and I want to thank you for sitting Sportside on 1045theteam.com.